Welcome everyone. Dr. Stephen Hobbs here with Chris Thomson, and we're going to do an exploration of the topic of Taoism and Taoist. And we're doing this because Chris and I are going to have lots of conversations over the next little while to expand on some of the WELLTher videos that I will be posting a link to. But what we want to do is to explore some of the other topics, because I'm writing a series of books called Elder, Mentor, Celebrant, Weaver, and Magnificent. And Chris has his own variations of this, and one of them is Taoist. And I said, well, let's get on another series of calls and start exploring where you're coming from. And he says, sure, we'll jump on board. So again, I'd like to introduce you to Chris Thomson, and I'm just going to have Chris just share a little bit about your background, where you're living, what you're up to, and so that people who've maybe not met you so far can get to know you.
Thanks, Steve. Well, what to say? I'm Scottish. That's probably fairly obvious. I live in a part of northern Spain, which is called Catalonia, or Catalunya if you live here, right next to the mountains, the Pyrenees. I've done a few things in my life. We can discuss the details of that in the future if you like. I came here about 12 years ago, and I've been writing books and doing interesting things ever since. I mean, that sounds a bit odd when I say it, but actually it's true. I mean, my life is very interesting, and it's a privilege to say that. It's a privilege to live the way I do live. You mentioned the word Taoist. I don't think any true Taoist would claim to be a Taoist, just as no truly spiritual person would claim to be spiritual. Having said that, feel free to quiz me.
Well, I think one of the best things to do is just start off, what's Tao? And just give us a basic introduction to that, and then that would probably connect with Taoism in your own way, and then we'll come back to talk about Taoist. So where would you like to go? Just share away.
Well, it's the second most popular book in the world. The most popular being the Bible. But the Tao Te Ching, little book, is the second most popular in terms of the number of books printed. There are loads and loads of translations. In fact, there are over 250 translations in English alone. Imagine that, over 250. No one knows about the book. People think they do because they hear the word Lao Tzu and they assume Lao Tzu is a name. It's not. Lao Tzu is Chinese for the old guy or the old geezer. That's all it means. So no one knows who wrote the book. It could have been a female or a male. No one knows, okay? And if you wonder why it is so popular, all I can do is give you my own take on that. I think it's popular mainly because it's ineffable. Ineffable means you can't really put it into words.
Right.
So it's an immediate contradiction. Here's a book which consists of words, albeit in Chinese characters. But as you may know, one of the most famous verses in the book is, he who speaks does not know. He who knows does not speak. So it's a kind of contradiction. The fact the book was written in the first place is a contradiction in terms, okay? And yet, you know, if I was to single out one or two of the most important characteristics of the book, I would say it's ineffable. The book is trying to say things which are quite difficult to say. They're quite difficult to put into words, okay? Even the word Tao has several meanings in Chinese. It means the way with a capital W, which implies the only way, okay? It means a nature with a capital N. In other words, the world of nature. And the implication is the two are the same. So the way is the way of nature. In other words, if you want to be a Taoist, all you have to do is go outside, look around you, and copy what's going on. By which I mean be like nature, act like nature, do what nature does. So that is the essential message of the book. Be like nature. Look at it, what is nature doing? And if, to the best of your ability, you copy it.
So I know that you ski and hike and climb. Could you give us an example of where you might go out during the day and do what you're sharing, just so that we have an example of that?
Yeah, I live in a valley in the Pyrenees. The valley floor, the bottom, is 3,500 feet up. Yesterday, I walked up to 6,500 feet and looked down on the valley. I could see where the village I live in should have been, but couldn't see it because it was covered in mist. It's very, very typical, Steve, to have morning mist here, especially in autumn and winter. So you get temperature inversions. Okay, it's colder down here than it is up there. And while I was up there, I do what I often do, which is I sit down after a while and have something to eat. I just sit and contemplate. And by happy chance yesterday, a small family of chamois turned up. In case you're not sure what a chamois is, these are these mountain deer, small mountain deer. Very nimble, very elegant little things, okay? They're called chamois in French. They're called isards here. I don't know what they're called in Canada. A family of about 5. I wasn't too surprised because they are quite common. And what caught my attention was the adult male, the dad, because he just looked at me as I was looking at him. And he must have thought I was as strange as I thought he was strange. Because as it happened, I was talking into my phone, making a recording. And he, the chamois, must have thought, what on earth is going on? What is this human being doing? Talking to himself into this little black thing. And I felt immensely privileged, Steve, really I did. You know, that it's still possible in this degrading world we live in, where so much is covered in concrete, that it's still possible to do what I did yesterday, which is just to have a good staring match with an adult chamois, while he was looking at me, wondering what I was doing, and I was looking at him and wondering exactly the same. So, I mean, I wouldn't say that happens every day here. It doesn't. I don't climb every day, but because of where I am, that kind of experience is very possible. It can happen quite often.
Well, that's great. So in many ways, what's a term I want to use here? Okay, what's coming to mind is this notion of, it was almost like a noble experience, right? There is a certain majesty, that sort of majestic, right, that sort of happened there, that you're exchanging. So would something like nobility or something like that fit into what you're talking about in terms of the Tao and the flow that happens?
Well, it's strange you mentioned that. When I hear the word nobility, I get very emotional. I don't know why, but for me, it's a quality that ranks very high indeed. And you know, even though I knew you and I were talking today, it wasn't because of that. I was reading some old text this morning about the old mystery schools. and I came across a passage which talked about nobility. And basically what it said is that the people who get through the training, the ones who become successful, and there are not many of them because it's a difficult training, they're the ones who have inner nobility. You know, and I recognize it's a bit like the Tao Te Ching, which is hard to put into words. I recognize that nobility is hard to put into words. But for me, it represents the best, noble inside, you know. The reason I moved is because that's what we could all be. We could all be like that, Steve.
Yeah.
What I'm seeing is the best of what a human being can be.
So another word that I might link up with that, because it's something I've been reading the last little bit, your notion of power over, power with, power because. So would there be something of the power of nobility that would be in play here for you?
Yeah, I mean, just to, I mean, at the risk of repeating myself, I get very emotional. My father, who died in a long time ago, 1996, was a very noble man, you know, and I feel slightly embarrassed at saying that. After all, he was my father, okay? But I say it because for me it was true. I remember my mother saying to me, you know, your father has never done a bad thing in his life. And, you know, when I went away and thought about that, when I thought about her words, I realized it was true. And it was quite a remarkable thing to realize. Because my father was a fairly ordinary man, and I use the term ordinary in its best sense. He didn't shine at anything except at being human. You know, above all, he shone at being human. But he didn't shine in the conventional sense, if you know what I mean.
Well, and that was why I was just sort of the imagery that you were giving with, you know, meeting the smaller deer on the hill, and you're speaking, and the quizzing that might be going on in both of your minds, but yet it was a real and noble exchange that took place that in many ways would be ordinary, but yet for many people, if they ever experienced it, it would be almost extraordinary because they've never seen them up that close. So that's why the nobility word came to mind, and then the power kind of concept came. I just went, it was kind of a neat thread I thought that I would throw in, you know, that notion of threads to strings to, you know, to cords to ropes kind of idea. So anything you want to ask about that? Because there's another phrase that we've discussed that I want to go over, but is there anything else about this power of nobility?
Just to state the obvious, that the word noble is often misunderstood, okay? It's associated with the aristocracy, the nobility. But for me, it's associated with the best of the aristocracy, by which I mean, you know, the kind of old-fashioned idea of the chivalrous knight, who was noble in every sense. You know, he or she, it could have been a she, was competent physically, was courageous, and yet was kind to the nth degree. You know, and typically in legend, you know, looked after women and children, was kind to the enemy. All of these things, these were all qualities that could be, you know, summed up in that one word, nobility.
Yeah, so in many ways, it was the kindness that you shared with the deer, the kindness you shared with yourself, the kindness you shared with the mountain on that day is sort of a way of looking at this way of experiencing Tao. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I mean, people don't really realize what it's like to live here. So I'm in the Pre-Pyrenees, a lot of forest around here. This is a very big area, a lot of forest, and a lot of wild horses. And it might be hard to imagine that too. So about 10,000 wild horses in the area, many of them living in the forest, in the woods. And from time to time, I've encountered them. And I well recall a few years ago walking up a very narrow mountain path in a forest and 4 big stallions coming the other way down the path. Quite big beasts, okay? And I've got used to this idea that animals are not unfriendly. That animals are friendly creatures, but by their very nature. I've got used to that idea. And the leading horse, as it brushed past me on this very narrow path, towering above me, you know, deliberately kind of nudged my head with its head as if to say hello. Really, and you know, and I could imagine that for many people that'd be unimaginable, never to be experienced. You know, you might think using the word noble is strange in that situation, but for me it sums it up. You know, there's a noble creature living naturally in the forest, comes across another creature, me, and nudges my head with its head, you know, as if to say, well met.
Well, in my walk the other day, there was a squirrel, and normally they're gone, but this one actually just stood there, sat down, and watched me walk by, which is very unusual. So to your point, it was a great experience because I went, well, this is different than usual, because normally I'm trying to look between the trees, trying to figure out where did he or she go. But this one just sat and looked at me as though, why don't we have a conversation? But I was headed somewhere. So there you go. So maybe what we can do is just move over to something that we've talked about a couple of times in our interactions over the years. And it's around this, the concept of leadership. And we know leadership when we see it and feel it, but sometimes there's this notion of there's invisible leadership. And you have a perspective on this that I think is worth hearing about, because it's not a term we normally hear when we, you know, pick up leadership books and all the other kind of things. So share with us your thoughts about invisible leadership. And I bet you it links back to Tao as well, right?
It's a Taoist idea. The Taoist idea is you, ideally, you would be influential in the world, but people would not know it was you. So they'd be an influence caused by you, but people wouldn't know, they wouldn't associate the influence with you. Okay? The leadership or the teaching, if you like, would be invisible. And that is very important in Taoism. Why? Because it detaches you from the ego. You have no ego outcome. You know, you have no investment in the outcome. What do I mean by that? I mean you are true to yourself. You behave as you behave, as a Taoist might express it, okay? But you don't behave to influence. You don't behave in order to get some result or to get some profit or to get some adulation. You don't. You know, if the fact that you exist in the world has some benefit, The Taoists would say that's a bonus. It's a nice bonus. The fact that you exist is producing some benefit to other people or to the world or both would, to the Taoists, be a bonus. I'll give you an example and you can come back, okay? You know, if I happen to have a particular gift, I wouldn't use it to make money. I wouldn't use it to start a business. I wouldn't use it to make myself famous. I would not even think of it as a gift. For example, if I play the piano well, then I would do it because I enjoy playing the piano, not because I want to make a career. If I'm able to help people who are sick or suffering because I have some kind of talent, natural talent, okay, then I do it. I don't do it because I want to make a career out of it, or to become famous, or to get a Nobel Prize, or anything like that. In fact, a Taoist would never accept the Nobel Prize. It just wouldn't happen.
Okay.
I could go on at great length, Steve. There's much to say on this theme, but I don't want to overstay my welcome.
The key thing here is that, yes, we'll pick up some of these threads again, because I believe there's a lot more to explore. And the three words that or phrasings that I picked up that I think are important, you let me know, okay, is expressing the ineffable, the power of nobility, and invisible leadership.
Yes, the answer is yes.
So that would sort of summarize sort of some key thoughts and perspectives out of today. Our conversation today.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as we aim to close off today, because the series is meant to be around 21 minutes, something like that, for ease of listening. Is there a thread that you would want to offer that brings those three statements together, sort of like sewing it up a little bit, and just to offer a perspective from your sense?
Well, I suppose two words come to mind, and that is being natural. And, you know, I realize immediately that it's not easy to define what that means. You know, there's no quick and easy definition of what that means, okay? But I think there's know what it means, even if we can't put it into words. You know, the story I mentioned earlier about meeting the chamois yesterday on the mountain, you know, whatever else these creatures are, Steve, they're natural. It is impossible to imagine them being unnatural. Nothing they do for the whole of their lives is unnatural. Okay. And I suppose that applies to all creatures. It applies to all other forms of life, like trees, for example. And here I'm sticking my neck out a bit, okay, into controversial territory. But I suppose we are the only form of life on this planet that, how can I put this, is often unnatural. That would take a year and a day to explain what I mean and explain why it happens. But I think you know what I mean. You cannot imagine any other creature or form of life on this planet systematically destroying the planet. You cannot imagine that happening. You know, we call ourselves the most intelligent species. And you really have to laugh at that. You really have to laugh at the arrogance of that statement, because David Attenborough is about to bring out a new documentary about all this. But the gist of the documentary is, are we intelligent? Why is it that the most intelligent species is causing so much damage? So the themes you and I discussed today, being ineffable, nobility, invisible leadership, they can all be summed up under that heading of being natural. If these chamois could speak, they would say the same, more or less, as I've been saying today.
And as the horses that passed you on the path, and as to the squirrel that stood on that tree stump, there is something to be said for that imagery, that experience, and weaving that into our lives. So with that, Chris, I want to thank you for today. There'll be some notes below the video and links to other parts of our conversations and other places. And I would encourage you, if you're visiting and you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe to the channel and hit the little bell, I call ring the bell, so that you can get notifications of when we're going to be doing more. And I am going to be interviewing Chris more over the days to come, weeks to come. But also, please share a comment. You may not always agree with what we're sharing. You may not agree with what Chris just said. And it'd be great to see your comments and your likes and shares. So please interact with us. I know Chris to be one who he'll go for a good interaction. He likes to have good interactions, and being an educator at heart myself as well, I love to. So we both ask you to do so. And with that, we wish you well. And Chris, I'll see you on the next one in a short time from now. So thank you very much for today.
Thank you.